So, first of all, we're going to start with this. What do we call this?
Tenderloin.
Tenderloin. What was another term we used?
Pismo.
Pismo. And like I said, if you've got someone that wants to do the cut steaks, it's great to do this in front of them. How we would do that is we would weigh this first, and we talk about this is your total cost. Then we trim it. Then we cut it into steaks, and we show them what their true cost of steaks would be. And that's the only way to get an accurate representation. Okay? So, I have paid $15 a pound for this whole thing. Am I going to get $15 a pound out of this?
No.
So, we talked about the center part of the fillet, the butt end, what I call the hatchet. We've got this thing right here on the side called the chain. Okay? You want to get your fillet with that on it when you order that fillet in the restaurant? Probably not. So, nice thing is a lot of this you can do with a hand. We're going to just kind of peel this. Now, what do we do with this?
Ground. You can then
We grind it up
Yeah.
because they paid for it, right?
Don't throw it in there.
Now,
don't throw it away.
one of the issues you get with this is there are some, remember the difference between collagen, this good fat that will cook down. However, you see this silvery right there? That's silver skin. Silver skin is the elastin part. That's not going to break down ever. So that we're going to mechanically trim off because people are not going to want to eat that. Also, you think that makes a good steak? Probably not. It's too small. So I'm going to take that off. Silver skin, we don't keep. Even the grinder doesn't like silver skin. Now, I have seen people do this whole process in 60 seconds. I am not as fast as that. Besides that, I kind of want to show you how it's done. There are people that will use this butt as a steak. But you know, a lot of times if you see a bacon wrap fillet, it's because they've taken this part of it. If I'm going to go to a good restaurant, I'm going to take that off. Okay? Now the wrong with it, we can use it for something, but it doesn't make the best steak. One of the questions people ask me is, how much do I trim off of it? And my response is, it depends on the restaurant you're going to. Because if I'm going to a high-end place where I'm going to pay $50 for this, I don't want any of this stuff on my steak, okay? That extraneous fat. So I'm going to get rid of all that. Let's get rid of that silver skin there. Once again, you would chew on that all day long.
Good dog treats.
I wouldn't even feed that to my dog.
What is that cost for?
What?
Is that always on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Think about this. The part that holds your body together, that allows you to work and holds me, is this connective tissue.
Okay.
Everything living has a connective tissue like that. So if we took that off, you'd basically be just like one big bowl of jelly. And nothing would hold together. So, yeah, there's just really nothing you can do with that. Now, this edible type thing, would you leave that on? Some people would. If I want something super clean, I'm going to take that off. There was a time there was a local country club here that I used to spend my summers when I wasn't teaching. I work at this local country club, and I came up with this I call ballpark stew that I would throw all this kind of scrap into, and make a big pot of chili out of it, because this is good. But my filet eaters, when you go in a restaurant, do you expect to see a whole lot of ugly trim on your steak?
Nope.
No. I'm paying for the Cadillac, right?
Usually the biggest critiquers.
So I'm going to trim all that little bit stuff off there.
Just
This
think
is-
of that $15 a pound. How much you're cutting off.
Yeah. We're not quite done yet.
I'll tell you, if we ever get the opportunity to go up to Middendorf and watch their cutters do their thing, it is unbelievable how efficient they are at doing this process. Because they do it the same way chefs do it, except they do it every day, all day,
And they do it in
pretty
about
impressive.
they do it in about 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Years ago, I worked for a school that we did a lot of high-end catering. It was a college, and we needed to have the best quality beef. And here's kind of a good lesson: is I was a caterer, and so I wanted my steaks to all be the same. So when I ordered my filet, I was getting steak, and obviously, if I said I want an 8-ounce steak, some of this small end would be like this. Some of the other would be like this. That makes sense? Well, if I'm a caterer and I'm doing 300 steaks, how do I get those to all come out the same way every time? Well, the processor's plan was, well, you just need to cook them different or cook them at a different time. I didn't want that. So what do you think I did? I could cut my own, which I didn't want to do.
Ordered it that way.
I ordered them that way. I set a spec, and I said, I want the 4 center cut steaks out of each filet. Do you think that was more expensive or cheaper?
Way more expensive.
Oh, it was way more expensive. But the thing is, I got the same steak every time. And I could grill mark those steaks, and I could finish them in an oven, and they would all come out the same exact way.
And then you can charge accordingly, and most importantly, get the people to come back.
Yeah, I will tell you, nobody ever complained about my steaks because they were just beautiful. All right, we're just about there. A kind of a far cry from where we started, isn't it? So once again, do you think from what you've seen here, you should be selling people on cutting their own fillets?
No.
Not right now,
No.
Okay. Now I'm making my own chili. I'm grinding my own beef. Okay, keep that in mind. So that might be something, to look at.
If they're able to use the excess.
Yeah, the thing is, if I can't use this and I can't use this, no, like I said, there's nothing wrong with this. Beef tips, we're all familiar with beef tips, all right? So we could take this, once again, what do we call this part? This really tough part I'm taking off? Silver skin, okay? So, if I take some of that off, and once again, I'm taking that, it's even tough to cut through. Trim all that. It is not going to be as tender as the other, but it's something I can still sell, and I can charge a little bit less for, or I would. I know it seems like I trim a lot off, but I do. Once again, if your customer is going to be serving this or selling this, $40, $50 a steak, I don't ever want a customer to have to take something out of their mouth or have that piece of gristle. One of my favorite steak places ever down in Rogers, Arkansas, Mr. B Steakhouse. Chef Bruce, who has left us now, did all of his steaks on a flat top. Hey, you ate there, right?
Yeah.
Good steak?
It was a great steak.
Who ever heard of cooking a steak on a flat top griddle? But that was Chef Bruce's way, and I'm telling you what, that man could cook a steak. But the best part about his steaks was his fillets, or his ribeyes, which he was known for, had such a tight trim on it. There was no gristle. There was no extraneous fat. I mean, it was all beef. He charged a good price for that steak, but it was an amazing steak. All right. So here we've got the butt end that I can still make a few steaks out of, or this may be end up being my beef tips. It might be also something that I'm going to do my bacon wrap fillet, especially this one here. Put a little bacon around that. Most people won't know the difference, okay? Still got to find a use for this if I'm cutting my own steaks. What do you do with that trim? Make sure you're asking people that. Then we go back here. Now, I may still go back and look at this once I've trimmed it, just to see if I've got any more that I want to take off there. But, so, I've done this before. It still takes a little bit of time. Would you say from a labor standpoint that just anybody could come in and do this?
No.
So when your customer goes, I think I'd like to cut my own steaks. Okay, this is when we go in with that cryovac steak. This is when we go in with that fresh cut steak program. Yeah, I understand why you want to cut fresh steaks. I love Dan's point. Well, you know, when you ask about why do you want to do prime? Why do you want to do fresh steaks? Well, I think it's a better quality. Okay, well, let me show you some of ours. Our cryovac, they're wet aged, so they're going to be a little more tender. They're going to have a little bit more flavor. You sell that as your strong point, okay? Because not everybody wants to do this.
How many pounds was this starting out, did you say?
How many this one started out? I
Yeah.
think this was about 8 to 9 pounds. So when you look at this, I'm going to tell you, still usable. That's burger or scrap. 50%. We have just raised our price 50%.
Those are about 8-10
on
ounce
that meat.
fillets.
So if you find anybody cutting their own fillets, definitely think about our fresh cut steak program or a cryovac steak, okay? Because yes, this can make a burger. However, there's more scrap than there is burger meat in there. All right. So
And then $16 a pound burger.
yeah,
That's amazing to see how little you get out of that.
So Chef, can I mention one thing?
yes, please do.
So when he was cutting, you saw the center cut. When he had that one loin, he's cutting the center cut out of. What he cut out of the other part of the head of that loin, there's a term on the street called metro fillet or a city fillet that they can still sell that, and your competitors are going to sell that as maybe a center cut, and they can't do that. And what you're going to tell the difference is $29 a pound compared to $14 a pound. So that head, it will cut anywhere from a 3 to an 8 ounce out of that, and maybe market it as a center cut, but it's not. They call it a metro or a city fillet.
And like I said, I'm really torn on that. Do I use that as a steak? You know, I can get 2, depending on the size of that butt end or that hatchet, I can get 3 steaks out of there, depending on what I'm doing, maybe even 4 for what I'm charging for these. But for what Jimmy's saying, if people want to call that a true center cut fillet, it's a lie. It's not true. Now, I can still call it beef tenderloin. All right? It's not quite as good as that center cut. It won't be quite as tender, but all right. So what do we have here?
Brisket.
This is the brisket. Now you notice right off the bat the difference between, we got a shape size here. Also, when you look at the fillet, it's smooth. You notice that? There's just no grain to that. Okay? We know just by looking at it, I walk in the restaurant, I see this, I know that's going to be a tender piece of meat. Okay? Now, look at this thing. Look at that grain that runs through there. I walk in and I want to try to figure out what they're buying. I can tell right off the bat, you know, that's a tougher piece of meat. Okay? We love this for the barbecue concept because that slow moist heat is going to break this down and make it tender. I mentioned the term London broil earlier, which is really more of a recipe, not a cut of meat. And basically what they'll do is they'll take this, or usually flank steak, and they will marinate it, and then they'll cook it just medium rare, and then they slice it against the grain. Okay? Slicing it against the grain mechanically tenderizes this meat. All right. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to actually have you gnaw on a little piece of this, because, and I say gnaw, we're gonna cook a piece of this up or two, and I'm going to cut it with the grain and let you try a piece of it, and then against. One thing about brisket, from a sales standpoint, I think, would you say the biggest issue we have with brisket is the amount of fat on it from a customer standpoint?
Can run very fatty.
Sometimes you'll get these, and this fat cap is much bigger than we'd necessarily like. We have no control over that. It's a cow, all right? So if I was going to do a barbecue, I mean, this one looks pretty good. I'm not going to trim this at all. I'm going to poke some holes in it. I'm going to rub it. I'm going to throw some garlic cloves in it, and I'm going to just go ahead and put it in there. But sometimes you will have people say that brisket is too fatty. Now,
Is that silver skin or is that collagen?
no, this would be the collagen. You can get in here. There's not that much silver skin on this. There's a little bit on in here. But we're going to cook this in a perfect world, 8 to 12 hours, and get rid of most everything. If you ever have a customer, and we have a customer that I walked in one day and they do barbecue, and they had literally taken every scrap of fat off of their brisket.
It gives the flavoring.
And it was sitting in a pile, and they had cut a couple briskets, and so I'm looking, and they had a pile of fat this tall, and it's like, why did you do that? Well, we saw it online. True story. Okay, because you know you're going to have a really tough piece of meat now, and it's not going to have any flavor. Once again, do you see a lot of flecks of fat in there? Look at that meat. Do you see a lot of flecks of fat? No. That marbling is what gives us flavor. So we know this is not going to be the most flavorful piece of meat. So we're going to leave that fat on and cook it basically in its fat. And that's what's going to give us our flavor. Okay? So, yeah, that place was like, please don't do that. And since I already cut that, we talk about the two types of things. Our flat, this part here, and our decal up here, or our point. You will have barbecue places that just say they want one or the other. Some will buy whole. Some will say, I just need flats. And they want that flatter part that has less fat on it. A lot of us, though, we like that part, that decal that's got more fat on it. Okay? So, what we're going to do right now is we're just going to throw that on here. Everybody good with medium rare? Excellent. Hopefully that won't be too loud. And I'm going to throw, are you guys interested in trying a fillet? I wasn't sure. Well, actually,
Yeah.
are any of you interested in trying our Braveheart hand-cut, center-cut fillets?
I mean, if I have to.
It's all about marketing, right?
Find a chef.
Chef, good. So we'll throw a couple of those on.
I have Sam Shepard in my head.
Great.
It's what's for dinner.
All right.
You grab me a sheet. Yeah, the only one I could think of would be like your
Now,
scoop steak, because I didn't know if it's still 5 a.m. I think at the time.
Who's the new beef spokesman? Is that Matthew McConaughey or
I don't know. To be quite honest.
used to be Marlboro Man? Whatever, Shepard.
Yeah. All right, next. We have the ribeye.
Oh boy.
This is my favorite cut of meat.
Uh-huh.
In fact, if a cow was 100% ribeye, I'd be much happier. Because it's you know, although I like a good brisket. So, what kind of packaging is this?
Cryovac?
It's cryovac,
Wet age?
wet aged. Now, if you're new to this, when you first take that steak out of that cryovac, there's a chance it may have a funny little smell to it. Once it gets air to it, it's going to be fine, okay? It might even change color a little bit. If you're selling these to somebody and they're kind of bubbly, or the meat has an off color, or they're leaking, obviously don't use them, okay? Now, next to that,
Can I ask? Is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
the speculoos, that top part? Does every ribeye have a speculoos?
The
And it's that
spinalis?
front- Oh, it's spinalis, okay, excuse me.
yeah, I mean, you can buy them without, but like I said, the spinalis is the best part of the ribeye. Now, in contrast, is this is choice. This is Wagyu. It's also a different cut.
Once again, what is the difference between Wagyu and, what is it again?
Kobe.
Or between Wagyu and like a regular choice.
Just-
Wagyu means cow in Japanese.
It's got a strain
It
of
is
its
going to
own.
have a strain of that Asian cattle in it.
Kobe.
Genetics.
Yes. So, what it basically is going to mean is it's got a little bit more tenderloin or tenderizing or marbling fat in there. However, I could show you our prime, which is going to have just as much of that marbling in it.
That's one that Keith was asking about. I don't know
Yeah.
if we're just gonna crowd about that.
And I'll be honest, you'll hear it a lot.
Yeah.
It's a buzzword. Like I said, we've got a prospect that we're working on that was told, hey, this is just like Wagyu beef. It's not. And it's improper for a processor or a salesperson to say that. Don't get caught by saying something, that's not true on this. A lot of people say things like that, but I did this because you can see this Wagyu does have a little bit more marbling in it, okay? I'm not sure where we're running right now on these. This was, like I said, about $28 a pound for that steak right there.
Can I ask a quick, stupid question?
Yes.
If you didn't take that out of the package, how could I look at that right there? And is that what you're about to explain? Like, how could I look at that and say that's Wagyu?
If it was not in the package, I could not tell you that was Wagyu.
That's
That's what I was gonna
That's a
say.
good question. 'cause
I
was
could
like,
not.
is it really
And
the
once
difference?
again,
But I can see what you're talking about because we know what it is.
it's a great question because once again, it's a way for people to be unscrupulous and just say, hey, it's Wagyu.
That's
You
Kobe.
know, or there's people, like I said, people are gonna say, oh, it's Kobe. Oh, it's not.
You'll find me in the box.
So, and I love that statement because the number of times if we're in an operation, we're gonna say, can I see the box? Let me see the packaging, all right? You get a picture of that, you send that to Dan or JR or myself or Eric. If you're not sure, get a picture of the box. And I mean, that's a great point because I can't tell you what that is. Now, I can tell you it's in New York. I can tell you it's most likely prime, but now, how do I know that that's a choice ribeye and not a no-roll ribeye?
By the packaging.
That's the only way. I cannot look at that and tell you what that is. And so, be honest with your customers, but also know your competition, all right? And if they start throwing a bunch of terms out there, like I said, been involved with one lately where I just went to town and told this other person that you're lying. And I actually said that. I said, you seem like nice people, but I don't care. I said, my concern is for the customer here, to make sure they don't do anything they're getting in trouble for, and we're not gonna misrepresent anything. If he wants to buy it, fine, but we're gonna call it what it is.
Because didn't you have a customer that said, he was saying it's USDA, but it wasn't inspected, and you wanted to see.
Well, he still hasn't proven it's inspected. So, everybody got a better appreciation for like this cut steak, okay? Think about, like I said, the IQF, fresh cut steak, or even a frozen steak, I'm fine with. People say, oh, frozen beef's not as good. Modern technology has got us to the point where, those steaks are a lot better, okay? Any questions about that? We're getting there. Hope everybody's a medium rare-ish type person.
Is it a myth or is it true that room temperature is the best? I'm cooking it. Is it supposed to be room temperature before you put it on the grill?
I love that question. Is it best? Do we sneak those on there sometime?
Yeah, if I'm going to this one.
Because I'm gonna start cutting mine. I have kids, it's just
All
gonna
right.
do that.
Is it best to do a room temperature steak? Here's our example. I got a big old ribeye, all right? I take it right out of the refrigerator. I throw it right, it's nice and cold. It's really cold. It's really thick. So by the time I get that outside, it's going to cook pretty quick, right? That inside's still going to be cold. So I'm a big proponent to bring those steaks out a half an hour early. Let them sit. Another trick, in all honesty, is you take those steaks and you let them sit out for a little bit. Then you put a little cornstarch on them. Then you put that steaks kind of back in the freezer for a few minutes. And what happens is that cornstarch draws out the moisture. Try to get a good char on a steak that's all wet. And you can dry them off with a paper towel. But you put that cornstarch on them, it absorbs the moisture, then you go to the grill, to the pan, and it'll give you a really nice char. Okay? So,
Learned something today, Chef. Did not know that.
but yes, you definitely want to take that out and let it sit for a
Definitely
little
worth the
bit.
price of the fish.
All right. If you all want to take a quick 5, come back, and we're going to try some of this beef. And then we're eating tomatoes.